For folks who are unfamiliar with the district decision-making process, can you walk us through what that purchase journey actually looks like? Not this idealized version that a lot of vendors and ed tech folks would imagine.
Most district sales motions are a lot like enterprise ABM, except that the org charts are different, the titles are different. I find in EdTech there's more goal line blockers than you get in your traditional SaaS sales because someone's, even if you've done all your due diligence to say, okay, who's everyone I need to have at the table, someone's going to come in over the top and be like, well, actually, this budget just got allocated over here, or actually our Chromebook compliance just added this thing. And so now you need 4 more lines of code to make that happen. Like there's more blockers, but every district is its own universe and the way in which they make decisions is different. As a good rule of thumb, I would say you're often dealing with a director of IT or technology, a director of curriculum or instruction. Some districts have a title called director of innovation, which particularly if you're in the ed tech space is a good person to talk to. They'll usually have a seat at most tables, or director of outcomes, something like that, depending on what your product is. Those are going to be the core 4 or 5 titles that most ed tech companies work with. It's never just one person. Some districts have buying committees where they bring in school leaders, or maybe they bring in some teachers, but like at the end of the day, one person still makes the decision. So you're still going through that really good ABM process of, okay, who's my decision maker? Who are my influencers? Who else is at the table? And how do I have really compelling value stories and touch point plans for all of them? There's a lot of overlap between the way that you do enterprise ABM and the way that you sell to districts. It's just that if you want to sell a MarTech solution, eventually your CMO or a head of marketing or a director of marketing is going to sign off on it because they own the budget. That those titles stay the same across most SaaS companies. In districts, I think there's just so much more variability in titles. So you have to really dig in and do your homework about who the people are, what they call themselves, what things they're responsible for, and then kind of what pet projects they have in mind to make sure that you're selling the value story in the right way. The other thing to keep in mind is just that the purchasing window is super different than most other industries, right? Like from an annual calendar perspective, most ed tech companies, you do your brand building in the fall, then everyone comes back from winter break, and midpoint of January is when you start doing your real heavy, okay, this is where I'm going to set my pipeline for the year. You're doing heavy sales January through March. Districts get their budgets in May, June. So if you don't have kind of intent to purchase by April, you're not going to hit your year. And then, your POs come in June, July, you're implementing in July, August, and then you're off to the races again. And so one of the things I think that's interesting about EdTech vis-a-vis some other industries is, by February 15th, if you're going to make your year, because if you don't have enough in pipeline by then, it's almost insurmountable to overcome it, which is very different than most other SaaS companies. So from an individual selling perspective, it's not that different, just a lot more nuance. But from an overall annual planning calendar, there's kind of 2 failure points. And if you don't hit them, then you have to go back to the drawing board from a planning perspective.
So obviously seasonality, much more important than other types of SaaS companies. You mentioned there certainly is a buying committee, which is important, but there's usually one person who has the kill switch, so to speak. I know a lot of folks are targeting superintendents, almost across the board as part of the intended audience. But do you think that folks tend to over-index on superintendents, or is that appropriate?
Yeah, that is a whole group of people that also probably make decisions depending on kind of what the product is and how big the initiative is. I think superintendents, assistant superintendents are valuable allies, but at the end of the day, unless you've got a very small district, they're going to, if they see something interesting that comes across their desk, they're going to push that down because they just don't have they're not in the day-to-day of what are we bringing in to make, they're going to put it to their instruction person, they're going to put it to their outcomes person for true evaluation. So they're a powerful ally, I would say. And in some instances, depending on the size of district, and like I said, everyone's different, they have a seat at the table, but I haven't necessarily found them to be the biggest growth driver. I did a superintendent's event a couple of years ago, and I was kind of baffled by this notion. We're having this roundtable discussion about student outcomes, and someone was just like, yeah, I would be super excited to spend my time thinking about student outcomes, but they just elected a Mom for America to our school board, so the only thing I do is spend my time arguing with this lady that the books in the library aren't corrupting children. That's how I spend 60% of my time now, right? Because there's so much external, again, this kind of concept of this external noise that's going on. And superintendents, as sometimes having been appointed or elected, they have constituents beyond just what they are managing in the actual district itself. My take is that superintendents spend a lot of time managing that. So what goes on in the actual district vis-a-vis learning is, again, great ally. And if you have a good relationship with the superintendent, you meet someone's interested in the product, they're definitely a great ally to have at the table. I don't see them making final decisions on learning materials most of the time. Again, I'd be interested to hear some other perspectives.
In more cases, more of like a gatekeeper or someone who, pushes it up the ladder, so to speak. Most of the companies I work with have been partially targeting superintendents, and then some department special education directors, student service directors, that kind of thing, to be more, specific to their product, which tends to be verticalized.
Yeah. I don't know. It's almost like gate accelerator, right? Like, because if your boss says, hey, I saw this cool thing, take a look at it, it's going to move to the top of your pile. And so, as I said, like a good ally, a good door opener, but probably not ultimately a decision maker. But they are going to sign off on the budget, so they're good to have in your corner.